Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Rockets. In this episode, I sit down and talk with Lauren Petersen, owner of Travel Patterns, which pays tribute to the gorgeous traditional patterns that we find throughout travel and exploration as they partner with their inspiring and talented cultures that craft them. First off, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Hi, Clark. I'm Lauren Petersen, and like you said, I'm the founder and owner of Travel Patterns, which partners with weaving cooperatives around the world to craft home goods and travel accessories, mostly textile-based products, but we're based here out of Huntsville.
Are you originally from Huntsville, or did work or family bring you here?
Family. A long time ago, my family transplanted here, and then I went to high school here. So been here for a while.
Is your background originally in what you do now with Travel Patterns, or what kind of jobs did you have prior to doing Travel Patterns?
Yeah, good question. No, my background was not in indigenous textiles. My background is in interior design. I went to Auburn. That's what I got my degree in. And then I practiced that for 10 years before quitting my job 2 years ago to run Travel Patterns full time. But in the middle of my corporate career is when I started my side business, because you got to do that side hustle
Yes.
while you're working full time. So my background is in interior design, and I did that before Travel Patterns.
When you were getting the idea for Travel Patterns, was there a need that you saw in the community, or a need you saw that wasn't being fulfilled, or was someone already doing something like it and you're like, I could do it better?
That's a good question. It was kind of selfish, actually. I would say that I had a lot of experience traveling overseas, either for personal or for work. And I was really, really drawn to the artisan handicrafts that I was seeing in my travels abroad, like in India and Thailand. And so I was bringing these products back, either, women's fashion accessories or like home goods, things that I was just really drawn to. And I loved the handmade products that different artisan groups were making. I was just drawn to those, so I bring them back. And the idea for, so Travel Patterns is actually a rebrand of a different company. In 2014, I actually started a different company, which is where I was just curating products from different artisan groups. So the idea came from me just bringing back products that I loved from these amazing people groups, and I just loved sharing them. And there wasn't really that here in the Huntsville area. And so I had a lot of friends that were like, oh my gosh, like, where did you get that beautiful like purse or that beautiful pillow? So that kind of sparked the idea of, okay, like if I'm already going and I'm trying to build relationships and interact with these different groups, like I have the ability to bring them back, and it kind of creates this partnership. Because if we step back a little bit more, like through my religious background, I had been on several mission trips abroad, separate from obviously Travel Patterns, but through those interactions with a lot of different impoverished communities, I also realized that there was a need for continued sustainable partnerships through work, through jobs. And so through mission work, that kind of allowed me the opportunity to say, okay, like, where are my skill sets and my gifts, and how can that become a good partnership for these communities that you just become aware of through global travel, through international travel. So work and through creating jobs, that was kind of the idea. But I'm like, I'm an interior designer. I don't know what that looks like. I was used to the medical field, like medical professionals going over and doing partnerships that way. Or my husband actually has a background in solar. So like solar is such a needed commodity in a lot of these rural communities. And so I was trying to figure out how do my skill sets fit into this overseas partnership, along with then connecting with the community here. So bringing back these beautiful handmade textiles, which is what I really, really resonated with me personally. I felt like it was a good fit with my skill set, but also a way to add value to the partnerships that we were creating overseas for that sustainable revenue stream for them. But it was also a gap that was here, and that I didn't see. I mean, there may be people, I don't know, maybe I just don't know people here, but I felt like it was some value added that I could bring.
When you started this in 2014, you said you had you had it branded under a different name kind of before, and then you kind of transitioned to this. When you started it, what was it called? And you said you were kind of more of a curator rather than, kind of talk me through a little bit of what you were doing in 2014 at the time when you first started this idea.
Sure. That's a great question. So the original company was called Agriculture. And like I said, the initial idea, I'm working full time. I'm like, how can I slowly build this while working full time? Like, what am I personally able to handle while I'm trying to start this side hustle? So the idea was that I would go to a place, build relationships, buy the products, either in bulk or just large quantities with money that I had saved up, come back, sell it at a pop-up, because at that time, like I could handle a one-day event with my full-time job. So I would come, have a pop-up, sell these amazing products that I have, and then take that money and reinvest it into additional purchases. So that's how I started back in 2014. And obviously, as entrepreneurship, which I have no background in at all, you learn a lot over the first couple of years. And so I did several of these local pop-ups, which I really enjoyed because it was a way to be in the community here in Huntsville, share what we were doing, and then obviously create the continued revenue stream for the partnerships. But after doing that for 2 years, I'm like, okay, like what's the next step for us? What's the next step to building even more sustainable partnerships? And I felt like curating existing products wasn't quite as sustainable as branding our own products. So with my design background, which again, I have no background in textile design, but I have a little bit of an idea of like certain design schemes and color patterns and what, all of that from my design background. So I started to design my own products, which were based off of traditional textiles from the different countries that we were working with, but they're only for us. So basically creating a brand and creating our own patterns instead of curating existing products. Okay. So I rebranded. I felt like with the transition that we were going to from curating to making our own products, it just felt like a good time for a rebrand. So that's where Travel Patterns came in 2016.
So a lot of people, when they start a side hustle, there might be some disconnect with their job they do on the day-to-day basis. They might either feel as though their job that they're doing is something that they could be doing more to benefit somebody else, or that they just don't like their day-to-day job. Was that the case for you, or did you feel as though you loved your day-to-day job, but you just wanted to try something new, and this is the outlet that you chose?
Man, you ask really, really good questions, Clark. That's just a really intentional question. I did really like my full-time job. So a little bit background, I worked as an interior designer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I did that for almost 10 years. And I loved it. It had an amazing mission, obviously supporting the military families and those in service. And it was just such a unique time in my life. It was such a unique opportunity. Like most people are like, what, the Army has interior designers? Like that's so weird. So for me, like at the time in my life, I started working there just after the 2008 economic crash, which that's actually part of the reason why it brought me back to Huntsville after graduating. Because Huntsville's kind of a bubble in any financial crisis, which is ironic that we're going through this now again. But I really felt like God handed me this job at the Corps of Engineers as an interior designer. And I had, all these grand ideas about what I was going to do after college with my design degree. But that job that I worked was really instrumental in growing me as a person, the different opportunities that I had, like working with the military, but also just the team, like the team building and the experiences that they give you. And that was amazing. And I did a lot of international travel with my job from here. So I just felt like it really rounded me as a person, as a professional. So I did interior design, but then I also transitioned into a project manager at the end, about the last 5 years of my career. So I was handling, multi-million-dollar overseas installations for some of these facilities. So while that job has absolutely nothing to do with Travel Patterns, like when it comes to running a team and like communicating and just learning how to function as an adult, that job was instrumental. And just the team that I worked with was amazing. So no, they had absolutely nothing to do with each other. But from that job, I mean, I really grew up as a person and a professional.
You talked about a lot of like the entrepreneurial skills that a lot of people say they have. They've always thought of themselves as being an entrepreneur. You just really didn't have those skills. So when you started in 2012 with the previous just curating the stuff, and then when you transitioned to travel patterns, what kind of skills did you not have that you were just that you had to build? And were you reaching out to people to try to build these skills, or did you just Google and try to find answers?
Yeah, lots of Google. I will say I still continue to struggle with the financial side of things. I hate accounting. I do not like numbers.
Least favorite class in school right now. Least favorite.
Let me tell you. So in college, you know, I'm in design school. And so like all of the business classes, I was like, what's the grade I just need to like scrape by? Those are the grades that I made in business school. And I made like straight A's in design school. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, what did I do? All the classes that I'm now wish that I had paid more attention to, I just like
you're using it on a day-to-day basis. And you're
like,
just like, why didn't I just know this now? I need it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I would say financial accounting side is a side that I still struggle with, but it's just something you have to learn. And I've leaned on, I know the right things to put into place. I've hired the right individuals, got the right tools to help keep me in track for that. But that was definitely something I didn't have. On the entrepreneurial side, I will say, like, my dad has owned his own business for years. My granddad on my paternal side owned his own business. So I felt like owning your own business has always kind of been a part of my life. So I wasn't so much intimidated by that, but learning where are my skill sets, where are my weaknesses, and then how can I build up and put the right people in for those weaknesses is a daily and weekly struggle.
So when you first started in 2012 and you're just curating, you go into these pop-ups, what kind of success were you seeing when you go into these pop-ups? And did you see that that the need that you thought there was prior was that there was actually that need and people were super excited for your products?
Yes, I was actually really, really blown away by the support in Huntsville. So the very first one was in the fall of 2014, so 6 years ago. And I had it at my house, which I'm not even sure if that's legal now. And there were, God, it was such a special time. So the event was 4 hours. Before we opened, we had more than like 75 people like standing in the street outside of my house waiting to get in. I didn't even know like half of these people. I'm like, how did they even like hear about this event? I'm like, I'm just gonna throw a little like fun yard sale at my house and sell these like global goods. We sold out in like less than 45 minutes.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, okay, I guess people like this stuff. And every event after that, obviously was bigger and on a grander scale, and I tried to pull in like other local businesses, so they'd be like little pop-up markets. It wouldn't just be my products necessarily, because at that time now like big artisan markets and like pop-ups are like such a part of our culture now, but 6 years ago it wasn't really a thing here in Huntsville. And so I felt like there wasn't any place for me to go and sell my products that wasn't like a traditional brick and mortar. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to make one. I mean, if it's not here, I'm going to make my own market and see if other people want to come. And I felt like it resonated with people at the time. I haven't done one in a couple of years.
It's like the need was here. It was just a matter of like finding a place for the people to meet. I mean,
so every event that I had here in Huntsville was successful. I was profitable and then able to turn that money into additional orders from other people. So taking that experience, I do have some things in the works that will hopefully kind of lean on that from the community here in Huntsville.
So transitioning from when you rebranded to Travel Patterns and you kind of started doing that, tell me a little bit about the transition from curating to actually having your own patterns and creating the products yourself, and how that process kind of worked.
So obviously I knew different weaving groups. So for me personally with my company, because there's lots of different like fair trade, social impact, sustainable companies, whatever you want to call it, around. But I really wanted to focus on, like you said in your intro, like I really wanted to focus on the uniqueness of traditional textiles that are found in the different regions that we work with. For example, in Guatemala, every different they're not counties, but every different region, they're called departments in Guatemala, has, and every little town like has their own like pattern that like represents their area. It's almost like a calling card for that. And countries all over the world just have these beautiful textiles that like tells the history of their people, that tells the history of their region. Textiles just tell an amazing story. And so I'm like, if we're going to partner with groups overseas, like we want to be able to celebrate and preserve the culture that is there. So going off of that, knowing that I wanted to really work with traditional textiles, I had to have weaving cooperatives, which through travel and through building relationships with, you know, people all over, you kind of find the right partnership. Like, for example, I've been working with a weaving cooperative called Pishan in Guatemala for maybe 4 years now. And so once you find good partnerships, then, I mean, weavers, I mean, they're amazing. So I found traditional textiles that I loved, and we would take parts and pieces of it. We kind of rearrange it on, like, for example, a pillow, like kind of tell where to put the motifs. Like, do we run it down the middle? Do we put on the sides? Like, what colors are we going to do? Because all the textiles are woven new by hand on their different looms. So we can do whatever we want. But I chose to kind of take the textile patterns from the different regions and then reimagine them onto our products. But they're all handmade, brand new by the weaving cooperative.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the products that you say? You mentioned the pillows and you mentioned other sorts of products. What are some of the products that you have and some of your biggest products, and then products you've also kind of transitioned to creating because of the times that we're in now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sweet COVID. So originally, after curating products, when I started Travel Patterns in 2016, I started with really small like travel accessories because I'm like, I just want to do pouches. Like, what are small products that we can bring to the market as I'm getting also used to the partnership? Because there's also some learning that we have to do. Like, what are their capabilities? What is the quality level of the products that you're getting back? Like, what are the raw materials that they can get? Because if you're talking about like zippers, like not all zippers in different countries are created equal. It's, you know, kind of learning. Gets back to your question. I had no experience in this. This is all trial and error, lots of Googling. But once you kind of roll with that, you know, you can expand your product line. So I started with very small travel accessories, pouches, those kind of things. And then after felt comfortable selling those products, comfortable with the different partnerships that we had, I knew that I wanted to transition more into home goods. So I've been in the transition of working toward home goods, but then COVID hit. And so all of our timelines have kind of been totally shattered and everything's been pushed like 6 months to the right. So to answer your question, travel accessories originally, I would like to be more like a home goods company simply because I'm more comfortable with that with my design background. During COVID, we introduced masks because with transitioning to home goods, we, for example, with my Guatemalan partnership, also the Filipino partnership I have as well. Basically, we had the raw textiles already made that we were going to use for some of the pillows that we have coming. But the issue is that we couldn't finish doing some of the weaving simply because, for example, in Guatemala, all the public transportation is shut down. So we're talking about rural communities that literally do not have access to anything. They're having to truck, you know, supplies in. They're trying to limit contact, all of that. So we knew immediately that when COVID hit, we weren't going to be able to put the finished products together. But the seamstresses, which are in a town, still had access to their individual sewing machines. So we decided to take the textiles that we had already had woven for the pillows and make them into masks, because that would help keep the seamstresses, you know, employed kind of during this time. The weavers are still good. They're actually doing great. They have a mother cooperative that, you know, helps keep them. But for us, we transitioned from, okay, we already have these raw materials. What can we make out of them? And so masks is a needed thing right now. Never thought I would sell masks, but they've been doing pretty good. So
when you transitioned with Travel Patterns and you rebranded it as that, was you having the same success when you were curating as you did with Shop Travel Patterns, or when did you quit your 9-to-5 job at that time too, or were you doing both still, or how tough was it?
It was tough. So obviously, I'm not doing any of this in a vacuum. My husband and I, about a year after we transitioned from agriculture to travel patterns, we kind of started to look at, okay, like my full-time job is very demanding in a great way, but it's like I can't do both. I can't try to run a real company, no longer not just a little, oh, this is a side hustle, like pop-up thing. If I want to truly run a brand, then I need to go all in. And that decision was really hard because I liked my job. And there was a lot of there's a lot of security in it. And I think for me personally, I really thrive on excelling and doing things well. And so the entrepreneurial journey is not so rewarding all the time, like, cause it's really hard, right? You have to motivate yourself and you have to like encourage yourself a lot. Even with your successes, you're by yourself, even though you of course I have my family and some team members around, but for the most part, it's just you. So when I was transitioning from my full-time job to that, you're giving up a lot. It's not just the finances that my husband and I were giving up. There was a lot of personal pride, and I'm really good at this job and I love the work that we do. So I had to kind of work through what that was going to look like for me emotionally. But my husband and I financially planned for a year before I actually quit. So that was something that we're like, all right, if we're going to do this, like, we want to make sure that we're financially good when we're giving up, more than half of our monthly income for my job. So, but to answer your question, going from the pop-ups to a curated brand, definitely a lot harder. Definitely a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But we're looking at different revenue streams, right? Like now we're looking at how do we wholesale to other business owners? How do we grow our online sales? Like it's just a very, very different, market. I don't even know the right words to use. So that was a hard transition. It's still a hard transition, but quitting my full-time job has allowed me the mental space to actually give to my company. Whereas before it was like the pop-ups made sense because they're so short term and like you could work really hard for them and then they're done. And then you could like 6 months later, you could be working on the other one. But if I'm like really wanted to build a brand and a company, then I needed all the mental bandwidth to put toward that. And I didn't feel like I could do both my full-time job.
So you mentioned a little bit a second ago about the wholesale with clients that have the products as well as your online. Can you tell me a little bit about where, if someone is listening and they want to get one of your products or see your products, is there locally places they can go, or is the best place online, or what kind of is their stream of seeing what you have and purchasing what you have?
Yeah, definitely online is the best way to go. And that's kind of more what I push with the e-commerce site. There have been places around town that have held my products and across the nation, but since I've been in the transition of going from more of the travel accessories into the home goods arena, which was all literally last fall and the beginning of this year, right before COVID, it's like I was in this transition before COVID-19 hit. And so other boutiques don't have our current product because we're in a transition of changing from the product types, but they did in the past. So just our e-commerce site right now is the best place to find us.
What is something that you know now that you wish you would have known earlier in the process of creating travel patterns?
Oh, that's a hard question. Okay, I honestly don't know how to do that how to answer that because I feel like if I knew some of the things that I knew, I don't know that I would have done it. So I feel like for me as an entrepreneur, of course, like research had to be done, and we do a lot of like analyzing before we make decisions. But there are a lot of things that I'm like, that would have scared me if I had known some of the things that I know now. So like just jumping in, do you know what you know now, and then pivot with it when you learn more. I mean, I've already changed my company once. Now I'm changing product types, and then COVID hit, and it's like as an entrepreneur, you just always have to be ready to change course. But I feel like for me, it's always put me closer to something better or something like revealed to me something in the company I know I'm totally like dodging your question, but it's more like, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many things that I like wish I'd known, but I don't know that if I had known that, like how much money it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Like it's so expensive to start a company. Like all the different things that go into it, like year after year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't really answer that question.
It's kind of like the journey of being an entrepreneur is kind of, you wouldn't want to be an entrepreneur if you knew everything before you started.
Right.
Because that's half the battle anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't be an entrepreneur if the idea is already there. And if the product's already there and you're just trying to jump on and create it, you're not really creating the project yourself. So by not knowing, it's kind of, you wouldn't have started it. You didn't jump into this, what you do now, because you knew everything was going to be sunshine and rainbows. You jumped in knowing it was going to be difficult, and it was.
Yes.
And you've learned a lot along the way, and the journey is half the battle and half the fun.
I will say this, like, you know more than you think you do. I know that you go into things with a lot of fear, and you go into things with a lot of, entrepreneurs have to have a lot of confidence, but ironically, there's also a lot of self-doubt. Maybe that's just me. But if you can get over that, that's where everything like changes, because in the entrepreneurial journey, like literally, or just life, it's just life. It didn't have to be an entrepreneurship or even like working a full-time job for somebody else. Like there's always going to be things that happen. And so for me, just learning to say, okay, like, is it over, or is this just something that I need to change course? And like, what can I learn from it to make myself better, to make the company better, has always propelled me forward.
How much of your success thus far would you contribute to your hard work, and how much would you contribute to being in the right place at the right time?
I would say 98% hard work. There's a quote that I love to hear. Maybe I tell myself this every single day. It's like, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So I think there's this illusion that people, of course, and this has happened, I know that there are people that are like, oh, you got like found on the street, or like so-and-so just came upon you. But if you're going to build a company, it's got to be hard work. And it's got to be that daily grind, like kind of getting back to what I said before, like it's just me. Of course, like my family, I have friends, like so many people here in the community who have always supported me. But like, I'm the only one sitting in that computer every single day, dreaming for things. And I'm so grateful for the support, but like, you really are kind of alone. And so the hard work and the belief in yourself and the belief in the mission of what you're doing, is 100%. That 100% is what drives me, for sure. Not luck. I haven't been lucky yet. I haven't been lucky yet. So we'll see.
Being your own boss often means you have to make tough decisions. How do you go about making those decisions to ensure the best possible outcome?
I think you always have to go back to what is the big vision, and then do those decisions fit into the big vision of what you're going to. So obviously for something like COVID happening, I had to start to reevaluate, okay, like here we are, we were going to introduce new home goods products. Like, is now a good time to do that? Are making masks a good time to do that? And so, I mean, that's like a very like basic example, but in that moment, so for me, I was like, all right, well, my artisan partners are struggling right now because everybody's struggling. So what are the best ways that we can help to support our partners during this time, that still fits within my company? Because I'm not a mask company. Like, I mean, I know there are mask companies out there, but when I sat down and looked, and I'm like, okay, the biggest mission is to be able to financially support our artisan partners. But also masks do fit into this idea that we have about like pushing people to go out into the world and to value handmade products, to value like traditional craft, to go and see the world. I mean, the company that I built is built because I believe in travel and going to break your worldviews and trying to understand like communities outside of the one that we live in. So even though I'm not a mask company, I also just love the idea that I'm like, here now there's these masks going around the world, and like we can use them to keep each other safe, but they're also still providing financial support to our partners. So masks weren't in my plan, but when you sit down and look at it, you're like, it still all fits within the overall vision. So any decision that I make, I'm like, does this propel us forward toward the bigger vision for our company? Yes or no? I mean, it's not so easy as yes and no, but obviously there's a lot of analyzation that goes into it. Lots of conversations with family and friends. My poor husband, I think I talk his ear off a lot about my business. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's looking at starting their own business or company?
Find a mentor for sure. Whether that's like at the small business, like the SBA, through your bank, through your church, friends, find a mentor. And find a mentor who, they don't have to understand business, but it can at least, advise you on different ways, because it's a long journey. So like having somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, and that could be, a best friend, a husband, a parent, somebody you don't know at all. Yeah, mentor for sure.
How can people connect with you and support you in what you're doing?
So through our website, which is www.shoptravelpatterns, that's plural.com, or Instagram, which is also at shoptravelpatterns. Those are kind of the two places that I have the bandwidth to hang out on these days.
Well, thank you again so much for sitting down and talk with me. I love learning more about travel patterns and the journey it took to get where you are today. And I continue to look forward to the success it will have in the future for years to come.
Oh, thanks, Clark. Thank you for having me.